G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
So, Atima, thank you so much for making the time to speak today. Really looking forward to this discussion. So, your business is Omara Strategy Group. And I guess my understanding is that you're very focused in the political arena, helping people run for office, and you have a particular focus on helping females who are looking to, I guess, advance their political careers and interests. Tell me in your words a little bit more about what you do and who you work with.
Yes. So Mara Strategy Group, I started it in 2017. And one of the big focuses that I wanted to have, you can work with a whole bunch of clients, especially once you sort of pick your political party and interest and affiliations. But I really wanted to focus on women candidates, women of color, and then organizations that focus on training and coaching women candidates as well. I work with other clients as well, coming from sort of communities that are underrepresented in politics in America, but really have just a heart and focus for working with women candidates. I've been a woman who's run for public office and political party office in the US. And through those experiences, really thought I had something to bring to the table. And also having worked in a lot of campaigns and supporting a lot of candidates, that I really wanted to bring that to bear in my next iteration of my work, which was this consulting business. So
yeah, fantastic. And I guess as we were talking before we hit the record button, the relevance to our audience regarding the work you do, I think there's a lot to be gained from thinking about how females particularly improve their leadership confidence. I think it's less so a skills thing, but certainly confidence. And obviously this applies to males and females, but we're talking, I guess, predominantly females because that's an area you focus in on. Can you tell me your perspective on any particular differences you see regarding male leadership and female leadership? Are there differences in how you coach and develop male and female leaders?
Yeah, I think my experience has been having worked with a few organizations and a few women candidates, and having been one myself, is that, and this translates across all industry sectors, so I see this in business as well, is that in leadership, women tend to sometimes question their right to be in the room in certain spaces. And that's not to say that they are, as a gender, more insecure. It's really more so that you have what they call the imposter syndrome. They feel like they're not qualified to be in the room. And there was recently a study put out, or some articles put out through Harvard Business Review, that said the imposter syndrome is not so much a thing that's inherent in women or people of color or other folks who are minorities in certain spaces. It's more that it is a byproduct of being part of a community or a world that sort of doesn't see you around a lot in those spaces, that it might be more heavily male, or might be more heavily white, or might be other kind of constituent. You might walk into a space and you've been somebody who's been in you grew up poor and it's a very wealthy space, so you instantly feel insecure in that space. And so it makes you question your right to be in a room. And so given that sexism, misogyny is sort of a global problem, that women will encounter this in spaces where it's still very heavily male, even if they have amazing portfolios of work. And they just have to work harder to sort of overcome it. I think it's also on the employer, if you're working in an employee situation, to, encourage and create, opportunities where, that disparity is addressed. But if you're sort of going into business for yourself, it shows up, or as a candidate, it shows up where, oh, am I qualified to do this? Do I think I can do this? And, there's a study that says you have to ask a woman a certain number of times to encourage her to run for office. And that's, it's like close to 7 times sometimes. And men, they don't have that. That's much of a problem. Maybe once or twice they might have to be asked, but most of the time they're like, hey, I think I would be great running for office. Why don't I do that? Regardless of what their experience or their portfolio is. So that's how you see it show up. I think it's changed a lot more. I remember after our 2016 elections in the US and Donald Trump had won, and everybody's just like, this guy's never served in politics or public service. And that I heard that repeatedly when I would talk to women candidates. Like, I'm running because I realized, like, wait, a guy who's never been volunteering in the community, served on all these, public organizations, boards, and really been committed to sort of public service, just decide on a whim to run for public office. Wait, I'm a lawyer. I have served on nonprofit boards. I have done so much in my community. I am just as qualified to run for public office. So I would hear that from women candidates quite a bit. So so those are some of the things that I see as sort of a questioning of themselves, working on sort of encouragement, talking about, I am qualified, I am an expert in these things, and feeling that they have right to occupy the space. I think oftentimes women, because they're also socialized a little bit to be less aggressive, it can be a benefit in how women work together very collaboratively. That's sort of noticed in our Congress. I'm sure it is in Parliament in Australia as well, where not always being number one and being at the top, you're like, oh, let's work together across the aisle. Let's work together on these issues. And that's played, to our benefit on a lot of legislative items in the United States, at least. I've heard it's done the same across the world.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting insight. And certainly, my experience working with female business owners is that imposter syndrome definitely seems to be a little more prevalent. And that's not to say it doesn't exist in males as well, but I definitely notice it a little more in the females. So it's interesting to hear you say the same thing. But, I guess also that strength that perhaps the females don't recognize immediately, of being very good at collaborating, is perhaps something that they don't appreciate enough, particularly in the early phases of running a business, and how important it can be to collaborate with other business owners or clients or suppliers or whoever it might happen to be. So, and again, not saying that males can't do that as well, but again, anecdotally, I probably notice a little bit of that more so in my female clients as well. And so obviously you've stepped into the business arena yourself with your business. I'm assuming, were these all challenges that you faced in your leadership journey? And I guess I'm interested to hear, in particular, some of the things that helped you manage that, and maybe any insights you've got just around the way you've built and grown your business.
Yeah. I think some of the things that I definitely, when I first started off, I didn't understand, public speaking on panels, all of that I had, because I had been a candidate who'd run for public office, because I had led, a political organization. And so I had to do a lot of public speaking. I was very confident in talking and selling my skill set. That's one thing I think when you're a small business person, you're really trying to build your brand, like when you're talking on podcasts like this, or you're, at panels for your industry, feeling that's part of it. The other part of it is really understanding the importance of selling, and doing that in a way that's authentic to you. And if you were somebody who maybe came out of sales in your business, maybe you worked for a company and you were the salesperson, you're probably going to need this less. But if you're somebody who's starting a business new, invest in like actually learning how to feel comfortable in selling your services, because that's something it's not everybody knows how to do that. Like a lot of folks think, oh, you just know how to do that. Or they have some sort of stereotype of how you sell, which is sort of like a car salesman or something. And it can be very different if you're doing selling coaching services versus consulting services. So, I had to take, working with a coach on just learning how to sell and be more comfortable doing that in a way that worked for me, and really promoting myself in a way about my business, and having to remind myself, okay, it's the same as when I was running for public office. Like, why am I qualified for this office? All right,
Yeah.
why would I be great to be hired to work on this service for you? So those are some things that I sort of struggled with and then invested time to get better at, so I could be successful in growing the business.
Yeah, excellent.
And then, oh yes, and I also want to add, also making sure you know who your ideal client is, and then knowing where they are. So whether that's LinkedIn, whether that's Instagram, because you're a photographer, you have a photographer business, so you get to highlight your photographer reel there. Whether it's TikTok, you're a video creator and you're selling, like maybe you're a travel business, and so you want to show great locations or the type of services you'd book if you're a travel agent or something. So understanding where your clients are gonna be and the best way to display that, and who's your ideal client. Those are the initial things I wanted to get down, and I needed to get down to be successful.
Want to become the best manager you can be? Check out our Kick-Ass Manager course at growasmallbusiness.com. Do the course and add your fellow managers for no extra cost. Join the 30%. 70% of people quit their job because of their manager.
Yeah. And look, it's really interesting to hear you say those things. And in particular, knowing your ideal client and where to find them is a theme that comes up in these podcasts regularly. So I hear that every second podcast, there's advice around getting that ideal client worked out. So it's really interesting to hear, that was obviously a big part of your journey as well, really trying to nail down the ideal client. And I guess, around some of these other things you were talking about with the selling and the referrals, a lot of it does come down to building confidence. And I guess, potentially stretching it into the political side of the work that you do as well, where confidence is obviously important in terms of, whether it be public speaking or advocating or whatever it might happen to be that you need to do. Do you have any advice on how to build confidence? And is it, how much of it is just leaning on logic in terms of, well, I can list out all the reasons why I should be confident at this, and is there another element to it, to building confidence and belief in yourself?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of, sometimes you do need to be reminded. Like, I've got a great partner in my own husband who tells me all these great things I've done. Sometimes I look at my own resume of like, oh, I've done this. Of course, I know, when I'm getting ready to sell with a client, and I'm like, God, I know how to, wait a minute, I know how to do this because I just did this. Like, like reminding myself of that and psyching myself up. And sometimes it's also, I wasn't great at public speaking. And so I initially in my early days of sort of getting involved in politics. So I invested in a public speaking coach, right? And then, I put myself in situations where I practice and I practice and I practice. And like with practice makes perfect. And like that builds your confidence over time. And it's the same as sort of selling and, maybe having a partner that you work with, who's an accountability partner who kind of helps you get better at how to make that sale, how to have those conversations, how to close. Because sometimes it's not even just being reminded how good you are at what you do, but it's also practicing things that you aren't as great at that are critical to the job, and putting yourself in scenarios where you get to use that skill until you feel like it's very comfortable for you.
Mm. No, I think they're really great points. And the benefits of investing in building skills and just, essentially training yourself like a sports person would train. It can't be underestimated. And obviously, if you've practiced, you're undoubtedly going to have more confidence than if you didn't. So it makes heaps of sense. Yeah. And tell me, is it a similar process, I guess, building these skills in business as to, I guess, the work you do in the political sphere when you're trying to help people in that space build skills and competence in what they're doing?
Yeah, big training is a big part of what I do. So, it was a couple weekends ago, I was training folks who are candidates who care about the environment on how they can better talk about, their work and what they hope to do if they're elected, and on public speaking and how they tell their story and how they connect with folks. And then at the end of it, they kind of show to us their campaign plans. They practice their stump speech. They tell us how they're going to outreach to people. So there's training that goes into it. There was one candidate I worked with. She needed, when you're running for public office, I know this is the case in Australia, you have a lot of debates, you're on the stump, you're meeting a lot of people. And so you work with candidates sometimes on getting them comfortable to be on stage debating the issues. They already know a lot of the issues, but sometimes they just need to practice what they're going to say. Have, whether it's a hostile interview or a friendly interview, so that they're comfortable and that they're the most natural when they're having these conversations. So yeah, lots of training and coaching involved in it. And, I'm a big proponent of it, especially when you're stepping up to be a leader. If you're growing your business and you're someone who is like, I haven't had that much experience managing people. There's management coaches out there that help you learn how to better manage people, and whole organizations and institutes dedicated to that. So if you're nervous about being a good manager to new staff, there's ways to go out and train and be better at it. So.
Yeah, excellent. No, I think they're really good points.
Mhm.
So, tell me, if there was one piece of advice you could offer our business owners out there who are listening to this podcast today, for something that I guess they can take away from this discussion, if they don't hear anything else, what would that one bit of advice be?
Yeah, one thing that I have learned and I have encountered, especially when you're in that early stage of starting your business, trying to grow it, finding new clients, is don't underestimate the folks in your network who are really could be helpful to your building your business. I was recently at a summit for women business owners at various different levels. And I remember talking to one who said, she told me what she did. And I said, oh, you should get on LinkedIn. I think it was marketing. She said, you get on LinkedIn. And she's like, oh, I always thought that was, not like a space. I thought that was for influencers. And I was like, no, I mean, people who, are like talking about, are influential in their space are on there, but there's also folks who are just regular, have smaller followings. A lot of folks are getting on LinkedIn to learn about DEI or marketing or other types of industry. And you should get on there as well. And I said, put, your personal professional network then this is where you can also find folks outside. So I realize some people don't think, or they don't think that their business is viable because they only have a bunch of referrals. And I've grown my business because I've used my network, one through building it in LinkedIn. And so I've found some cold prospects that way, but also people that I know and are in my industry, see what I do every day, and refer me, or I ask them to refer me. And so that's a gold mine. There's a study out there, I think it's Nielsen, it said that people are 4 times more likely to buy from you if you are referred by a friend, and 70% more likely to close from a lead that's warm because it's a referral or someone who knows you, than if it was a cold prospect. So yeah, still go to the prospects, still, go to the conferences to meet prospects, do your ads on platforms, all of that to bring in new leads, but don't underestimate and spend time every week thinking about who in my network is connected to people who would be interested in buying my services or my product.
Excellent. And again, you're echoing a lot of what we consistently hear on this podcast around some good advice of growing your business. So it's just so interesting to hear how everyone from such varied industries and backgrounds and skill sets all sort of circle back to very similar stories when it comes to growing businesses. So really appreciate your perspective on that as well. So Atima, if people want to find out a little bit more about you and the work that you do, how do they get in touch with you or track you down?
Yes, I'm definitely on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
Yeah, Atima Omara. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are on there as well for their work. And I'm definitely on Twitter and Instagram, Atima_Omara. So
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for making the time to talk. It was really interesting to get your insights, and we look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.